Pregame.com.
Tuesday night NIT semifinal action. We've got Minnesota versus Washington. He's Scott Spreitzer. I'm Marco D'Angelo. Scott, set the table for this one here. We've got the semifinal match between Minnesota and Washington. On one side, you've got Minnesota rolling in here. They've covered 7 in a row. They're everybody's point spread darling right now. They've done it as dogs. They've had to do the whole NIT on the road. Got no respect, no help to get to New York. And then you've got Washington. And I look at this Washington team, and they're like the jilted girlfriend of the NCAA tournament, because they won the Pac-12 conference, lost the opening round in the conference tournament, and the NCAA said, no thanks, we don't want you. So do they got a chip on their shoulder? Are they coming to New York with something to prove?
I'm sure they do. And the bottom line is the Pac-12 was so down this year that's what hurt Washington. Unfortunately for the program, it gets hurt by the teams that were surrounding them. But when you look at, when you break it down, I mean, after that win over Nebraska on February 5th, Minnesota was 17-7. They thought they were going to the big dance. It looked like they had a pretty solid shot to get there. All they had to do was basically probably split the remaining 7 or 8 games that they had to play in the regular season, but instead they fell apart. They went ice cold. They lost 6 straight games. And for a team that ranks in the top 50 all season long as far as shooting percentage is concerned, I mean, all of a sudden this team shot 38% over that 6-game stretch, that losing streak. They were 29 for 104 in their final 2 games combined, the final 2 losses before they won their regular season finale against Nebraska. And that kind of like sparked the shooting to come back, I mean, to get back on track. They beat Nebraska to wrap up the regular season. They're, 4-1 since then, I believe it is. Only loss was in overtime in the Big Ten tournament, and they've shot quite well since then. I don't know if it's that 5 of those 6 games during that 6-game losing streak came against Indiana, Wisconsin twice, Michigan State and Ohio State. I'm sure that had something to do with it. But also Ralph Sampson was playing back then, and they seem to be more clogged as far as on the offensive end is concerned than they were lately when he's been out. But guess what? He's probably going to be back for this game. So I don't know if the fact that he's in the game is clogging up the offensive end of the court right now for this team. Last few games he's missing, and this team has been running up big points. They've been averaging about 75 points a game during this nice run over the past 5 games or so. And again, they're hitting their shots.
Well, I think you know me, I'm kind of a contrarian. And this is a situation, I think people are going to look at this game and they're going to see now, here we are in New York on a neutral court. Washington was spoon-fed 3 home games in the NIT to get here. It's almost like we feel bad what the NCAA did to you. We're going to help get you to New York. Ironically enough, as bad as the Pac-12 was, we have a chance for an all Pac-12 final because Stanford's in the other game on Tuesday night. And if they win, you could have Washington and Stanford for the NIT championship. But Washington, people are going to look and say, okay, they won their 3 games at home. Now they got to go on the road, so to speak. It's neutral, but they're not on their home confines. They're going to look at Minnesota and say, Minnesota's done all of this on the road. Now they're getting a benefit going to New York. They're going to be playing on a neutral court. And the line is Washington -1. It's pick the winner. I think come Tuesday, once we're taping on Monday, I think the public's going to line up on Minnesota in this game because the Pac-12 has just got trashed. I think, honestly, Washington got screwed by the NCAA, but I think it was really a blessing in disguise. And why I say that is this was a young ball club. They only had 2 returning starters this year. So for them to actually win the Pac-12, even though the Pac-12 was down this year, they've definitely exceeded expectations going into this season. If they would have went to the NCAA, Scott, I think they would have been one and done.
So do I. Yeah, I agree.
They've got experience playing in the NIT and tournament. I think it's going to make this team better next year, and they're going to be a team that's going to fly under the radar. So that's for next year. But for this game right here, I think they can win this game. I think it's going to be a close ball game, but I just think that Minnesota might actually kind of go, we managed all those road games. Now we're here in New York. They might just relax a little bit. Where Washington now, they actually got to play more focused because they're away from home. It's not a best bet, but I'm going to go with Washington. I have them winning by 3. It's not that far off the line, but we're looking at a game that we just got to pick the winner. I think Washington moves on to the championship game.
When I was, me, I'm a matchup guy before I do anything else, and it works pretty well for me for the most part. We've had done well in this business, but the bottom line is, they got Terrence Ross, Tony Roten, these guys for Washington. They got huge guards. Their top 4 scorers are all guards, but they're built like small forwards. I mean, they got 3 guards right now that go 6'5" or taller. And that's what you got to deal with if you're Minnesota. Minnesota's guards aren't tiny by any means. They're not 5'10", 5'11", but they're in that 6 foot to 6'3" range. Yeah. All of a sudden, you're going against 6'6", 6'6", and 6'5", as far as the backcourt is concerned for Washington. And they're not just big, they're athletic too. And that's what Lorenzo Romar wants out of his Washington guards. I mean, you've got a guy like Ross and Roten who are combining for 11 rebounds per game between the 2 guards, So you're really going to have to play a different style of basketball if you're Minnesota in this game than what they had the last 3 to get here. The one place that that Minnesota can be had is defending the deep shot, the deep perimeter. They're not good defending the 3. Washington's not really that good at shooting the 3 ball. And the thing that scares me about laying a point or a game that could come down to a basket or 2 is that Washington's free throw shooting, as you know, is just horrendous, about 63% from the free throw line. But when I break it down from the matchups, in fact, I didn't even mention Abdul Gaddy. There's another guard who goes 6'3" or 6'4" for Washington. These guys have that size in the backcourt that nobody, including Minnesota, is used to facing, and that could make a difference. I like what you said about Minnesota really having to be so focused for their 3 games leading up to this contest that there might just be that human error, that human characteristic of where you just have that little bit of a let up because you made it to the Big Apple. You're playing here at MSG where Washington has to refocus things and Romar can say, hey, we got it done at home, but we're 18-2 this year. Yeah. You guys, let me see if you can bring it on the road now, in a neutral atmosphere.
Still have that chip on their shoulder.
Exactly. Too. Oh, you mentioned, by the way, next year Washington. I was going to say mark this down for next year also. I think Minnesota is going to be a player at least in the top 4 of the Big Ten next year. They got Mbakwe, who was injured early in the season after like 7 games. I think this is a completely different team next year when he's back and he's healthy. I think Minnesota keep Tubby Smith in place, and they're going to be a team to watch out for next year also.
So many times, and it goes back to like bowl games. I've talked about this numerous times on podcasts, that when you get young teams that maybe just sneak into a bowl game,
right,
it's so beneficial. Maybe they're going to get beat in that bowl game or whatever, but it gives the coaching staff an extra month of practices that they would not have had if they didn't make it. It's the same thing here. Going into the NIT, yeah, it's not the NCAA, but both of these teams made way deeper runs than they would have in the big dance, and it's going to benefit them next year with young ball clubs.
I also wonder, my final point on this, Marco, is with Sampson being out for most of the last 5 games, and it looked like this team got much more fluid on offense, and now he's supposed to be back. I mean, check the injury updates, everybody, but it looks like Sampson's going to be back for this game. All of a sudden, do they have to adjust for that also? Because this team was flowing.
It changes chemistry.
He's definitely a big player. He's going to get you 20, 25 minutes a night. And all of a sudden, you got to factor him back in the mix when everything's been going so smoothly over the last few games when he's been sitting on the bench. So it'll be something to watch out for.
Good. Well, there you have it. I've got Washington for Tuesday night in the NIT action. You can check out all of the coverage all week long. March Madness continues as we go to the road to the Final Four in a championship game next Monday. You can follow it on pregame.tv. He's Scott Spreitzer. I'm Marco D'Angelo. We're going to be back. We're going to look at a game on Wednesday. NBA, Orlando, and the New York Knicks. That's up next.